say. Yesterday it was announced that Kyren Lacy and Garrett Nussmeier were both announced to the Maxwell Award list, which goes to the top overall player in the country, offensive player. Last year, Jaden Daniels was one of 3 finalists for this award last season. He got hosed on it, to be quite honest. But the Maxwell Award has been presented to College Football Player of the Year since the late 30s and has been around forever. But to see 2 of LSU's on the list, both on the offensive side of the ball, not too surprising here, I don't think, for Garrett Nussmeier's spot. But it does highlight, I think, going into the season, how big of an opportunity this is for Kyren Lacy.
Yeah.
You know, we don't talk about a lot. I know we haven't on this show a lot about Kyren Lacy and this wide receiver group, at least from the top down, because of, you know, when you start the conversation with this LSU football team and you talk about the specific side on offense, you know, it really is tough not to be drawn to the offensive line, tough not to be drawn to the quarterback who's coming back as a veteran, tough not to be drawn to the tight end in Mason Taylor who's playing in his 3rd season. It's tough not to be drawn to Caleb Jackson, who feels like a breakout star on this team.
John Emery.
Right? I mean, there's a lot of stories, it feels like, before you get to Kyren Lacy.
Yeah.
And
well, it's an interesting conversation about Kyren because it feels like it's either cautiously optimistic or you're penciling him to be something he hasn't been yet.
Yeah.
And that's not a slight to him. You've had Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, but Kyren Lacy's been a steady presence, but you're asking him to be a 1, and people are – I think it's either you're like, yes, he'll be the 1, or it's like wait and see.
Yeah.
Because they have plenty of talent at the wide receiver spot, but you don't have a top end – you don't know who the guy is yet.
And this do you think this watch list, whatever, is more to do with Kyren Lacy and what he's shown, or the fact that he's going to be supposed to be wide receiver 1 at LSU?
I think that's what it is. I'll speak for myself here, and I'll be honest. I need to see it.
Yep. I agree.
To believe it.
He's solid.
On Kyren Lacy, I think he is he's potentially the best 3rd wide receiver in the country. He's a solid number 2. He's an unproven number 1, in my opinion. That's just where he is for me. And that's not a knock on him. If he did it, if he succeeds at it, if he passes the test, I wouldn't be surprised.
Got all the tools.
If he's drafted after this season as a mid-3rd, high 4th rounder to be somebody's 3rd, 4th wide receiver before catching on and becoming ultimately a 2 in his career, that would make a lot of sense to me. A 2 or a 3 in the league for the next 6 or 7 years probably would be who I would label him as going into the league, right? From LSU's number 1 wide receiver standpoint, the bar is extraordinarily high.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, you're talking about right now guys that are setting records as far as, you see what the Cincinnati Bengals said about Jamar Chase? They said they're going to break the bank to sign Jamar Chase. Talk about breaking your negotiation, right?
The owner said, I'll bend over backwards.
Showing you my poker face. Like, no, forget that. Here's my poker face. Here's my hand. I'm about to break the bank on you, right? I'm about to take your ex-teammate, Justin Jefferson's record that he just set, that LSU's recruiting off of, and I'm gonna blow that away for what I pay you, right? And all that expectation for that was set while they were at LSU. Odell Beckham was talking about being the highest paid wide receiver. Him and Jarvis Landry would used to argue about it in the practice lines. That's what they would do. They'd try to beat each other to the facility. It got to a point where they were coming to the facility at like 2:30 in the morning, catching balls off the jugs. One morning, Adam Henry, the former wide receivers coach here, showed up because somebody called him and said that the alarm's going off at the facility and he thinks it's your guys, and if it is, you go take care of them. He shows up. Jarvis and Odell are laying on the carpet catching out of the jugs machine at 3 o'clock in the morning. He sends back video to the guys. I mean, like, it's like, God, I've never seen this. I've been coaching football for 20 years. I've never been around anything like this. all of that expectation while they're sitting in there catching the balls, laying down off the carpet, off the jugs machine. They're telling each other out loud, I'm going to be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. No, I'm going to be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. Both of them broke each other's record. The same thing that's about to happen to the former number 1, number 2 wide receiver. The same thing I believe potentially could happen to Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors in 4 years. So the bar is really, really high. And when you're an LSU wide receiver and you've got the pressure, you've got the label of being number 1, not only do you have to make plays and you have to get your numbers, you got to open up the field for everybody else.
Yeah.
Because if you're not a true number 1 and they don't have to guard you like a number 1, well, that doesn't open the field like LSU's offense has been tooled to run for the past, name it, Dwayne Bowe. I mean, when you got one of them, when you have somebody that can really stretch the field, that the defense is saying, hey, if you don't apply help to this guy over the top, if you don't apply help to this guy and give him some help somewhere on the field with him, where we've got to double him, that opens up the field for so much other things to happen. And for LSU in this type of offense, that's run game, that's screen game, that's underneath, that's all types of options. So for LSU's standpoint, they need Kyren Lacy to be the number 1 threat. They need him to be the number 1 wideout.
I don't know if you need him to be the number 1 because you have so many options. Right? Like if you look at the way this offense is going to be constructed, or it feels like it, the run game is going to be a massive part of what LSU does. And then you get a Mason Taylor will be much more involved in having 350 receiving yards, especially if he comes back healthy. I think that Nussmeier translates more to a kind of tight end game than it does for you have to have Kyren Lacy, because he doesn't have a Malik Neighbors skill set where he can do everything. Like he can take the top off the defense and he can route you up on 3rd down to where you're like, I know where I'm going with the football. Brian Thomas over the top, and you're like, this guy's a legitimate threat. We have to double him. For LSU, I think you have guys that could do that. Chris Hilton could be a double team like a problem. If you don't mark him up and see him, he'll hit you for 80.
Yeah.
But I think LSU is going to be played much more within the scheme of things, to where Kyren, if he could be a possession receiver, and that's where I think he'll make his hay, is if he can get rid of the drops.
Yeah, definitely. If he solves the drop problem, because I think the biggest draw for him.
Because you think of him as a vertical threat?
Lacy?
Yeah.
I think he has the potential to be
good.
Yeah, good, but like less of a vertical, like a red zone threat, because he's, a big time athlete. Like if you really watch him, like jump to go up and get a ball, I mean, he can get up there and get one.
He's a hell of a basketball prospect.
Right. And so what his draw is the yards after the catch. He, like we saw multiple times, when he gets the ball in his hands, he's going to break 1 or 2 tackles. Like that touchdown he had right before the half against Alabama, where he caught it over the middle and he kind of brushed one guy off and took the other guy into the end zone with him. That's what he can do.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to be Malik. It's not going to be Jamar or Justin, where they're going to take the top off or route, you know what I mean? But if he can be a solid number 1 with the other weapons they have on the outside, with Aaron Anderson, with Chris Hilton, with CJ Daniels, Xavier Thomas, the guy from Mississippi State, who is, I think, in the group with Hilton and Aaron Anderson, which is the take the top off the defense kind of guys. And I think CJ Daniels is a guy that's really going to impress and jump up as to be like.
I think he's the one.
There's a reason he came here, because he saw the room and was like, I can make a huge impact here.
I think he's the one.
I think
he gets to be the number 2.
Right. He's gonna. Yeah, it's gonna be right there for him. You know, like I think
they're going to be good.
Him and Lacy together are going to be
enough,
100%. Especially with Taylor, with Caleb Jackson, with I think Caden Durham's going to get some run. I think you'll see Trey'Dez Green probably get some looks in the tight end, because Pimpton. But I think with Trey'Dez, he's such a freak. Like it's going to be so hard to keep him off the field, especially at the tight end position.
I think so.
There's going to be some red zone throws. You're like, what are y'all going to do?
Right. And so I think this room, but then you look at, you got Shelton Sampson, you've got Kyle Parker, you have these guys that are going to want to prove themselves. So the wide receiver room, although it's not really proven, it's in such a good spot. And I think that's one of the things looking into fall camp and like seeing, okay, what what are the coaches seeing and who's getting the looks? Like
how do y'all want to
obviously,
use it? Because it's an immense pool of talent. How do you want to set them up to succeed?
Lacy, I think, is right now cemented in as the wide receiver one.
Yeah.
But I think after that, it's really not set in stone, other than Lacy. Like I think Hilton's is pretty close because they've been in the program for a while, but it's not a sure thing. Like last year, you knew what your top three was. Yeah. Even though Lacy, it was kind of iffy. You knew Brian Thomas and Malik.
Being a three.
Right. You knew Malik was your one, and Brian was right there with him. But now it's just kind of you've got.
It's on Nuss a little bit too.
Right. Definitely. 100%.
And I think that's going to be the biggest improvement for the offense, and the step that's most obvious to tell that Garrett Nussmeier has taken. I think with him becoming the full-time starter for LSU, the thing that's the most noticeable that he improves on is his decision-making.
Definitely.
I think that is going to come leaps and bounds to where it has been to what it has been perceived as. I know at times I was like, you can't play him. When he came in there and threw the left-handed interception against Southern, I thought he's too much of a lot. You can't put him out there. I mean, like that's too irresponsible with the ball. Like, I mean, like just to kind of put it bluntly, I mean, that's just you can't play that loose with the ball and expect to play that position. And the way that he handled the Wisconsin game, the way that he handled the bowl game, where you could sense in the preparation that meant a lot to him.
Yeah.
Like there was like, don't call me a gunslinger. I'm not a gunslinger. That's not who I am. That's almost a sign of disrespect to him a little bit. And I think that's what it's referencing.
Yeah. That's
the trigger that it pulls for him, is that you're saying in his face that you're a crappy decision maker.
Yeah.
Like I can't trust you.
You don't make good decisions. Like that's what you're ultimately saying, and he's pushing back on that. And I think that's what he's recognized, that he's probably got to improve to be a high-level player in college and a draft pick that, can play at the next level. Because to me, he's got everything else. Yeah. Like really and truly, like Nussmeier, I think, was really that close to Daniels when it came to playing early on, because you were just looking at him and you were like, I mean,
got all the tools.
Damn. Yeah. I mean, like they're just like, they're this close on like all the throws and stuff, right? And then you put him into a scrimmage and Daniels may make a play with his feet, and then Nussmeier makes a bad decision and you're like, oh, well, it's not close. It's like with that guy, he'll protect it and pick up positive yardage with his feet. With this guy, he'll gamble and put it up in the air, and it might be a drop or it might be a pick. I'm going with the safe bet. Because I don't think it was that clear early on that guy's going to win the Heisman. It wasn't like that's Jaden Daniels and that everybody else. It's like you have a fierce quarterback competition. This guy can do this. This guy has a lot of tools, but he may not respect the ball enough
to be able to do the job.
And I think that it kind of, to me, it was very obvious during that time. Brian Kelly was like, whoever protects the ball is probably going to play. And Daniels was overbearing to the ball, and Nussmeier was still a little loose with it, where he would kind of put it up in the air a little bit. And it was probably like, you know what? I'm going with the safe guy.
We're not turning it over.
Right. Like, I don't care that he doesn't throw it and that we miss out on I mean, remember how many times Kelly would throw the ball.
Yeah.
Let it go. How many times he would tell Daniels that early on? And there was times where he was like, but I think overwhelmingly he was probably going back and watching the tape and saying, I'm thankful he didn't release the ball right there.
Oh, he missed opportunities for sure.
For sure.
Also, this is the safest way. Like, that's what won him the job. So why do you think he would play it any other way than when he got in on Saturdays? Like, I know with the emphasis has been placed on not turning it over, so I'm not going to turn.
Absolutely.
And there were some times where you wanted to pull your hair out, and because you get 2023, we were like, this could have happened in 2022.
Yeah,
like it's open.
Yeah,
but he was also coached into, well, if I don't protect the ball, I'm not going to have the job.
I don't have the job, right? So I think Nussmeier,
He could find that middle ground. I'm excited for him.
I think LSU's got a big-time quarterback.
Me
I really
too.
do. I mean,
Especially going
I
off
hate
the
saying that
Wisconsin
out loud
game.
because he hasn't played that much, and you sound so much like a homer. But I would do these interviews from like a regional standpoint, and people are asking, how do you replace Jaden Daniels? And it's almost kind of like you have to be a little bit more reserved, but it's like, hey, you better watch out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
there's a world.
I mean, like, absolutely. There is a case where this cat's dropping back between behind 5 pros.
Right.
And he's throwing to pros, and he's doing it with just a swagger to him that he's making good decisions, and he knows where the ball's supposed to go, and he might light your ass up. So you better respect LSU
He ain't no game
under
manager.
center.
Yeah.
No, I think LSU's got a big-time player at quarterback. I really do. I think that he's set to have a season where he feels like everybody's saying about him, all he's got to do is manage the game. I mean, you just got to manage the game. Just don't turn it up. I think he's looking at it like,
I think that.
I'll manage it. I'm going to manage it with 30 points a game average. I think
I'll throw for 3.
Right. Like he knows the potential. And also, you got an offensive line like that as a quarterback,
And you got
to sleep so good at night.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, you got to be thinking at least we can snap it.
I'll have time.
And protect it.
Right,
I mean, above all else, if you watch Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, any of these guys, Peyton Manning, any of these guys that are mic'd up, and you watch them back on an NFL game, the first thing they talk about every single time is protection. That's all they care about. Where are we protected? How are we protection first? This is where we got to protect. We got to make sure it's here. Like LSU, in my opinion, he's going to be the most well-protected quarterback in college football. If he's not the most he's as good as any. And he knows that. And he knows more than we do. He's probably looking at the backups thinking, if I lose one, this guy's coming in.
Right.
I mean.
Well, and you know he's going to be prepared scheme-wise. It does have a little bit of a factor in what he does because he's the son of a coach. He's been around football his entire life, so he'll be prepared and know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And the other thing about Nussmeier is he cares so much about this job. You can see it
Obviously.
when he talks.
Loves it.
Obviously.
He's on the verge of tears when he talks about LSU.
Obviously. I mean, you don't see Garrett Nussmeier anymore in college football.
Right.
I'm probably here to say you probably don't see another Garrett Nussmeier at LSU in today's day and age. Transfer portal, NIL world, Garrett Nussmeier does not exist on 99.9% of college campuses in the country today. The only one that exists, it feels like, is a veteran at LSU who has paid his time, paid his dues, knowing that he could play at a lot of spots. He could go play at a lot of other places.
Could have been playing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about name brands, big-time schools, competition of LSU. But
Auburn would have killed
if
for
that
him.
stuff means anything to all of us, which I know it does, the fact that he stayed loyal, stayed at LSU. Now, he was benefited for it, but he should have been. And now it's his time. People ask him, do I think he comes back for one more year?
See.
I don't think he's looking at it like that. I think he's looking at it like, this is my chance.
Right.
I'm the starting quarterback. I'm going to set the world on fire, and I'm making a run at it. You know what I mean? He'll have a decision. Let me give myself a decision to make is a success. Not saying I can do it. I'm going pro. Let me just make the choice whether or not I can go or if I come back means that you've done everything that you need to do. I mean, there's nothing more that he can do if he's got to ask himself at the end of next year, should I come back or should I go?
Yeah. And from my perspective, if LSU's going to reach the level that I want, but I expect them to reach this season, like a college football playoff berth and potential run, it's going to be behind a season that Garrett Nussmeier has that's going to be good enough to get drafted.
Yeah.
That's going to be good enough to leave after this year.
I agree with that.
If I thought he was coming back, I wouldn't have as high expectations going into the season as I do. But to me, a lot of people kind of have this perspective of When you look at Burrow, it was take a year and then pop. You had Daniels, it was take a year and then pop. And so a lot of people are applying that to Nuss, but Nuss has been in the program.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he's a transfer in.
No, it's
like
a different story.
He came here as a freshman, sat. You saw the arm talent against Arkansas, against Ole Miss, but he wasn't ready. He got to battle with Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels won the job. Then he got to sit and watch the growth and grow with Jaden. It's not like he was just there.
Right.
He was on the practice field. He was in the room. He was with
headset on every game.
Right, with the Heisman winning
he's
quarterback.
Engaged.
And so, like, it's not going to be this. I don't think there's going to be the training wheels. They're not going to be on.
I agree with that
at all. And
I think
so
they were taken off in the fourth quarter against Wisconsin.
100%. And so if LSU is going to be the college football playoff team, I expect them to be that level. Whether they get the bid or not, I expect them to be that level of team, which they should.
In the conversation.
Right. Nussmeier is going to have a season where the draft is 100% on the board.
I could also see a world where Nussmeier, if depending on how, if he wins, if they go national championship, he has a great year. He's like, I'm out. If they come close and don't get there, he'd be like, I'm coming back.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, I think his decision might be dictated by the team's success.
Could be.
Because
you got to remember, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, I think that he could look at it and say, "We're right there. I'm coming back." These are also a lot of the guys that he came in with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, this is from that standpoint, a lot of those guys within the walls, they look at it as this is our run. Like let's do this together.
I don't think that. Inside the building, they're not going, I don't know what we got. They're like, it's fucking time with Nuss. They're fired up for him.
I thought Kelly in Dallas at SEC Media Days was the analogy was fantastic. It was when he was asked about Garrett Nussmeier, he used it a couple of times. He said it was as if he's been renting the car and now he owns it. When he would bring back the rented car, he didn't necessarily mind if it was dinged up a little bit or if there was a little, if there was a headlight out or there was something left in the back, whatever it was. He said now that it's his, you can just tell. You can just tell by the way he walks around, by the way he talks, by the way he handles and approaches things. He's just more engaged and prideful about it.
And he ain't letting anybody else drive it.
Absolutely. And that's what he's saying. I mean, he's not letting anybody take it away. It was good to see that the last announcement from the LSU waitstaff, the freak of the week, was Ricky Collins. I mean, I think that LSU's got a really good quarterback room this season. I know Bryce Underwood's on the way, and, we're all fired up for him to get here. But in the meantime, I think, Nussmeier as the starter and the backups with a guy like A.J. Swan, who's got SEC experience from Vanderbilt, and then you got Ricky Collins back there, who's had a really good summer. Coming off the heels of a good spring and a solid summer, it gives you some good competition going into a backup role that you've always felt secure about, right? For the last 2 seasons with Nussmeier, I mean, LSU arguably had the best backup in the country when you talk about Nussmeier, and he proved that in the bowl game.
31 of 45.
I think there's some real push from Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton of let's make sure we're that secure at that spot again. I mean,
and kudos to Ricky because it could have gone one of two ways when he brought Swan in, where he's like, "Are y'all fucking with me?"
Definitely.
And he was like, "No, okay, y'all want competition? I'll show you competition. I want to be the backup role. I want to play whatever snaps I get. I want them."
No, I think he's handled it fantastically. I really do. That's who Ricky Collins is.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Knowing Ricky, that's exactly what you should expect from him. Like, I'm gonna go get it. Like, you can bring him in. I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
Like, I'll fight him.
Right. Absolutely. We'll bring him in. I mean, whoever
Good.
else you want. Yeah. Number 1 player in the country. Like, I don't expect. People are what's Collins. I think Collins is.
Yep.
Collins is looking at it as if
He's
next
coming.
season, if Nussmeier leaves, it's his job.
Yeah.
Like,
that's how you have to approach this year. Is like, all right, if I know Underwood's coming in his mind, and he's like, well, I'm going to approach this year as if that's my job next year.
Right, and that's who he is, and I expect him to win the backup role. I really do. I think that Collins is going to be the backup on this team.
I agree with you, but I do think if it ever gets to that point, I think you'll see Swan first.
I don't know. I think that'll be discussed. I think that'll be one on
depending
the
on
practice
time, placement, game.
Yeah, I agree.
We need to manage this thing real quick,
doubt.
and then maybe Ricky will come in. But I think that's why you brought Swan here.
Yeah. I think if, say, Nussmeier goes down in the middle of a game, the guy pulled off the bench would probably
Quick
like
Swan.
an SEC game will be Swan, like experience. But like if there's a week of preparation and Nuss is going to be out, I think that's when the conversation might be different.